Hello, everyone, and welcome to the return of the show. I'm Ben, and I'm here with my co-host Alex on what is going to be probably one of the saddest reviews we have to do.
Big sad. Sad.
The entire episode, I went into this and I was completely like, you know what? I'm here for some zombies. There's going to be some scary stuff. Last episode was super frightening, and the preview for this one made it seem like it was going to be the same exact energy. It was not.
No. I came here for zombies.
Not the feels. I did.
Yeah.
So on just opening thoughts on this, and of course, if you don't know what we're talking about episode 3 of The Last of Us. Alex, you've played the games before. It is my understanding that this is the most massive departure. How prepared were you for this?
We don't ever really see Frank. We see his dead body in the game. And you don't really know that, the two of them were in love. It's kind of hinted at, but, it's not a big part. So this is, a really big departure. But, I mean, holy fucking shit!
So
it's so beautiful. I mean, this is it kind of reminds me of San Bernardino in the first season of Black Mirror, where it's all these episodes of horror and near future bleakness, and then you get one episode that is this incredible love story, and you're not expecting it because this is supposed to be a scary show. It's not.
That is, yeah, okay. So for context for our listeners, the episode came out last night on the 29th. It is currently the 30th. I watched it last night. You woke up this morning and watched it and then just kind of walked into this podcast. So
yeah.
For Alex, it's a little bit raw. For me, I have just been going through my normal social media trend, and everyone's just crying collectively on my For You page right now on TikTok and Instagram, and we can all just agree this episode, we're feeling it.
Yeah.
We're feeling it.
I mean, it's so good. It's so good. It's a really phenomenal episode of television. I feel like it's going to go down as one of the greats. Again, like I said, San Bernardino was nominated for an Emmy. It's going to go down as a really great episode of television, like The Suitcase for Mad Men, or just specific episodes that stick out and people kind of go back to as great storytelling, great writing. Because it's just so good. I was surprised too, because, I was okay, the pilot was an hour and a half. Now the episodes are going to be an hour. And this episode, I think, is an hour and 22 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
So I was wow, okay, it's long. And it wasn't long enough.
I needed more time with them, and the way that they just make you fall in love with Bill and Frank throughout it, and just Frank's introduction, it's executed so well. So real quick, before we get too much into Bill and Frank, I do think that it would be doing us a disservice if we didn't talk about it in the actual context that it exists within the show, because ultimately speaking, this episode, as beautifully standalone as it is part of a larger story. So we pick up the episode off with Joel and Ellie, and the first thing that we're kind of really thrown into is that not apology from Ellie, where she invokes it by bringing up Tess immediately, which obviously
I think it's I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish your thought.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, obviously, it's still a raw emotion for the audience, especially if you're going through a binge session. Because if you're binging, the last thing that you just saw was Tess's death. And then you would be going raw right into this.
Yeah, I was really struck by the very, very beginning of this episode when you have Joel. He's putting his hand that we have to assume has at least a couple hairline fractures in it, in the cold stream. And then he's stacking the stones, and there's just something so human and just like leaving a piece of like I was here, that really just like I don't know, that he just like right off the top, that really got me. It's like he's having a moment alone, somebody who really walls off their feelings and just like cooling off his hand and like stacking those stones. Really, something about that really moved me. And then to immediately kind of go into Ellie, and I don't know, because it's from her perspective, she doesn't know this guy. And I kind of think she's right to be like, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree, because Ellie didn't want any of this. Ellie was like essentially kidnapped by the Fireflies, and then the Fireflies gave her to Joel and Tess, and then Tess dies while moving her. Like, she's like, hey, I've been thinking about it. I'm contraband. Do not blame this on me. And it's interesting because
I think part of that definitely comes from, it's not like Joel has been an emotional person thus far. I mean, I really don't, I think part of why she's saying this is because Joel is the way he is. You know, if he was like distraught, I don't think she would be saying that, or maybe not quite in that way. But he is a very practical person, and I think she has to put out there because she probably also wants to suss out, like, is this guy gonna kill? Is this gonna kill me?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think from her point, like, and to be fair, there is nothing more frightening than men that like really, really bottle up their feelings.
Yeah.
Like that's. I feel like you don't need to be like the most experienced person to know that like Joel definitely just lost his partner. There's not really too much debate about that. And he is definitely like, he's not even letting out a scream in his like private moments. He's not expressing any of those feelings in that moment. So for her, it's like, yeah, I'm going to get it out there. Hopefully he's practical. And then if I get any red flags from this, I'm probably going to try and run away. Because this would just be bad. And like, the way that scene just kind of happens where she's like, it's not my fault. And he doesn't fight it. You can see that he's bottling up those feelings more and more in that moment. And then they just kind of move on. Like, I feel like
because I think he agrees with her too, because obviously it would be very easy to, but she's just a kid. So at the end of the day, he has to be like, you're right. So I can't be mad at you about this because it's not your fault. You didn't put she didn't put anyone in this situation. She's been put in this situation.
Exactly. And I just think that like that opening up, and then especially like as we go throughout the rest of this opening bit, and then even in the closing, it's just such a good bookend to the actual episode, and like really helps frame Bill and Frank, in my opinion, that we start out with these friction between these two characters.
Yeah, and in the game, they kind of have to like go through some of the like booby traps, like that's part of the gameplay. And some people are pointing out like they kind of grow a little more united over kind of like doing that, and then Bill is like very paranoid. But I think there's some really beautiful moments, like small things that we get from these characters about how they are growing closer. And so like even in the beginning, she like has his jacket and then she like offers it back, and I don't know, and throughout the episode there's a couple things, but that's like kind of the start of like,
well, I think
he's not just treating her like shit or anything.
Yeah. And I think one of the actually like really beautiful moments for me on that was when she's like, you got to ride in a plane, and like the amount of excitement that she has about that, what she has about the car at the end of the episode, and the fact that he kind of leans into it and like does treat her like a child that she is.
Yeah,
he doesn't baby her. He just treats her like she's her age and a normal kid.
Yeah, and I would think there's something extremely endearing about it's almost like and they have her ask a lot of questions, and I was like, she kind of reminds me of like a toddler, but she kind of is a toddler to the world. In that, like, she has no idea what a plane, like, or she knows what a plane is, but I mean, that concept is so foreign to her. So I think that's something that's very like endearing, and of course it would bring them a little bit closer where he's like, wow, like you really don't know anything.
Yeah. And at the same time, like there's still obviously plenty of room for conflict to grow. We have the entire scene at Joel's stash where she finds the infected in the basement, doesn't tell Joel that there even is that basement, just goes ahead, stabs it in the head, and then leaves. And kind of like, I'm not 100% sure how I feel about it, because I can't tell if I'm trying to read Ellie as wanting to feel powerful in that situation or deriving pleasure from that situation.
Yeah, that was probably one of the more wild Tampax Pearl commercials I've ever seen. Yeah, there's like a lot of discourse online on Reddit. And personally, I don't know, some people were suggesting that it acted a little more docile, like if it thought she was an infected, or if it was just trying to communicate like it just wishes it was dead. And could she understand that? Which, I mean, I don't know. Maybe we'll get more of that. I don't know. But that, to me, it just seems like, this is her chance in a safe way to kill something for the first time and, like, get it over with. Now that she's done it, she'll be better at protecting herself, is what I read into it. I feel like a lot of people are like, she's mentally ill. She's so dark. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, yes, I think anybody who grew up in this world would be dark. But I don't know. Personally, I didn't read it that way.
No, I do get that. I am holding some judgment on this, because while we are seeing some slightly darker sides of Ellie throughout these episodes, there is a lot to say about growing up in the apocalypse. And I think that I can't say that like, she's evil, or she's like she's like super fucked up. Because at the same time, we have these really endearing scenes where she's learning about these things, and we can see just kind of this really childlike wonder that she possesses at the time. And
it's also not like she's torturing the thing. Like, she does like the little cut on the head, and it's like just fungus underneath, and then just like one and done. So I mean, that was purposeful, obviously.
I didn't realize this until I started watching The Last of Us. So I always knew that like one of my like fears is a kind of typophobia, the like fear of like when you see like holes or things that are like mounded through people, usually like associated with like worms and stuff. Like for me, a lot of like fiction that has to do with like bugs in people or just bugs in general really grosses me out and gets under my skin. I wasn't expecting the same thing to happen with the body horror of fungus in this way. But I squirmed that entire scene.
I mean, it's so disturbing. It's kind of like, I mean, and it almost gives you the sense like, that's not a person anymore. It's just like a mushroom wearing a human skin, basically. Like almost literally.
Yeah.
Like just under the surface of the skin, it's not even human anymore. So.
And God, I will say the infected as a zombie, as a zombie concept, really good. I always knew that Last of Us players were really adamant about how different these zombies were compared to most zombies in media, and I get it. There is a major difference in how the horror works. There's a major difference in just the sort of not the ideological, but the philosophical meaning behind these zombies as opposed to others. It's really good, and like even in the one moment that we have a zombie interaction or an infected interaction here, it plays out really, really well. But we also learn one of the other really horrifying things is Fedra and what they did to you if you didn't make it to a quarantine zone, which incidentally is also how we begin to learn about Bill. So,
that's brutal.
I kind of figured that it was going to be the case that they were just off people if they didn't have the ability to go to a quarantine zone.
I mean, we kind of get that in the first episode where, that's the whole reason his daughter is killed, basically, because it's like, well, we don't really care at this point.
It's interesting because like Fedra, which I guess kind of would have been the equivalent of the of like the World Health Organization, or in this case the
I think it's supposed
American
to be like
equivalent.
FEMA.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. It would be FEMA. They just changed a part of the acronym. Actually, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, but it's supposed to be FEMA, and the fact that they would be this discordant and just like this much of a numbers game, also post-COVID, very terrifying, because it does feel like something that would happen now that we have lived through a real pandemic. But Bill, that man was prepared. First thing we meet about him is just the shot of him in his bunker in his second basement with all of those guns. Like, I have never had a more hardcore introduction to him. Also, the other thing that I just had a really hard time with the entire episode is I cannot divorce him from Ron Swanson from Community.
It's a little hard. And he's also just playing like a very rugged man, so the comparison is, it's hard to not compare. It's funny too, because have you watched White Lotus?
I have not watched White Lotus.
Okay, so the guy who plays Frank, Murray Bartlett, he's Armand in the first episode of White Lotus. I almost didn't recognize him because he's blonde in White Lotus. But yeah, the first time I saw him, I was like, Armand, what are you doing here? I love the kind of juxtaposition of this doomsday prepper who's just, on his own, doing his own thing, prepared for this his whole life. It's here, and now he's doing great. And then he meets someone who, this was something I was thinking about earlier. It's so interesting that Frank says the Baltimore like QZ is gone, but he doesn't say why. And I'm interested to see if maybe this was mentioned in the games or if it'll be mentioned later on. Like, did it get overrun by infected? Was it overrun by like raiders or people who are like just taking it over?
Yeah. I mean, like, two things. On the Baltimore QZ, there's any number of things that could happen. I don't know if Ellie and Joel's journey ever leads there, but it also establishes that the QZ zones can and will fall in different circumstances, which is a story element that we haven't previously entertained, because even the Fireflies are doing a really, really bad job overtaking the Boston QZ zone. Like, that's well established in episode 1. So the idea that they could fall, it makes me feel like, well, it can't be the Fireflies because they're incompetent, or at least they are in Boston. So what can take down a QZ zone? Is it just a swarm of infected? But like,
or just an one infected person makes it back in and infects others, and it just like, from the inside out, because they're not shy about killing people. So unless people didn't realize until it was a little too late and they're getting overrun.
I agree.
I thought that was pretty interesting.
And it opens up the door for later in the story. We know that these QZ zones might not necessarily be safe. So, and another important thing is that this was essentially like 17 years ago when this happened. So it is possible now that Fedra kind of has a little bit more of a groove on keeping lockdown in place, but it still opens up that storytelling possibility. The other thing I'd like to comment on really quickly is, was Bill really doing okay on his own?
Because he's doing better than a lot of people.
That is true. I will give him, like, he's alive, he's doing good, but like, the fact is that
he's enjoying levels of comfort that most people are not enjoying.
Okay, I will very much give it that. My only thought with him is he does have it. Like, the fact is that the second he sees Frank in that pit is a moment where he starts to realize, you can immediately start just realizing that, just based off of how awkward he is and his demeanor towards Frank that he hasn't been or seen another person in years
I
and
mean,
years and
yeah,
years.
he's so starved for human connection, for sure. Also the line about uh free lunch, this isn't an Arby's, and he's like, okay, well, it wasn't a free lunch at Arby's, that was a restaurant. So funny.
I
Yeah, and what it like ugh, so it's so good. He's so awkward. I love the scene where he's leaving the clothes on the bed and he's like talking to him and has to kind of like yell a little bit. I mean, I think Nick Offerman is gonna be nominated perhaps for an Emmy for this role. His reaction when he tries the strawberries, I just felt like I'm like, oh, yeah, I so believed that he hadn't had strawberries in decades.
yeah, it was
It was so beautiful. The acting in this episode was, I mean, it was just absolutely beyond.
yeah, it seriously, like Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett seriously knocked it out of the park on that. I feel like we're going to be talking about this episode for a very long time. Huh? See what I did there? But it's like the entire way that they play off of each other, especially in the beginning, and it culminating at that moment at the piano, which what a song choice and what a
Yeah.
like choice of
Linda
characterization.
Ronstadt, a certified gay icon.
And the fact that it's a song that is about that's about loneliness and love and the idea growing old together, which obviously in this episode is pretty core to what happens, but the way in which they both play it as far as like characterization is concerned, what for me was such a good example of writing, because you have it Frank who like tries to play it like really up tempo as if it has a little bit of swing to it. He's going a little too fast with it, and Bill's like, no, do not do that song, especially like that. And then when Bill plays it, you really understand how lonely this man is. And
Yeah.
they get their entire cute moment, and it's beautiful. But like that scene is the first time that I cried this episode, and
Yeah.
obviously
First of many.
it did not stop after that. Oh my god!
And then I do like that it just kind of cuts to like them in the middle of a fight. They've been together for multiple years. It's we really don't get to see that much of their relationship. So I think they did a really phenomenal job of just showing us clips that really defined the characters, really showed us like what it is to make a commitment to someone. Because if these people had met, out in the world under normal circumstances, they may have never been together. And, just like what it means to make a commitment to someone and to be there for someone. And yeah.
I think like one of my favorite things as far as just like cute moments, that because it's all character study this episode. Like the body of what happens with Bill and Frank for the most part does not impact the larger story, except for just kind of what's left over at the end with the letter and the letter's consequences. But like the little moment, that first fight, Frank is like, I want to paint things, I want our home to look nice, and like I'm going to fix up some of the shops, and like he really ends with, I'm going to fix up that boutique. And of course the boutique is the place that they go to go get their suits when they get married at the end. It was one of his first like wishes and things that he asked for was, I want to fix these things up and get them to look nice. And the way that it comes full circle, the way that like that which was one of his first wishes ended up being his last wish. And
yeah, I feel like in a lot of relationships, you usually have one person who's a bit more practical and one person who's like the more creative one. And yeah, they all need the practical side and the guns and everything to keep them safe. But the reality is, you also need to like feel like a person and a human who's like having a life worth living and make things look nice and take care of things. Cause I mean, it's just like important for your psyche.
Yeah. And I think that one of the really important things that this episode does is we're still in the beginning of the overall show. And it is a perfect foil for what they initially set up as Tess and Joel, but I think is actually more accurately a really important foil between Ellie and Joel. So, like, you can equate Frank to Ellie, and obviously Bill is very one-to-one with Joel. Like, Bill and Joel are both extremely pragmatic. They're both the people that care a lot more about the minutiae of situations. They're not going to show a lot of emotion. But with Frank and Ellie, or even Tess, like, you can see that Frank and Tess, the entire, like, friends over for dinner scene, which was adorable. Like, they're hitting it off. They're the actual buds. They leave their partners to go, like, talk amongst themselves at the table, which, like, who hasn't been in that situation?
Yeah.
But ultimately speaking, like, the amount of, like, joy that Frank exudes, it reminds me a lot of Ellie when she's making those discoveries about the actual world, and, like, you can see Joel opening up to Ellie. And forgive me if I'm wrong on this, but it seems like the main thread of this story is Joel and Ellie, and essentially Joel becoming a father again.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I guess it's time to talk about that letter now. But when he talks about, like, and also, like, what a really, again, Ellie's not I don't know why I feel like some people online are acting like Ellie's an absolute psycho. She's clearly not. I mean, like, when she stops because he wrote down Tess's name. But, now she's Tess, and she's the thing that Joel has to protect.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't think about that part
man.
like,
also, great job, Bella Ramsey, for reading the
I lost it at that moment.
That was so funny. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, like, for me, the entire, like, build up to the letter of, like, you walk into the house and the food's still on the table. It's rotting. There's, like, dust everywhere. And for a moment, I remember I was watching and I was, like, trying to convince myself that somehow maybe Bill was still alive, because I knew that Bill was supposed to be in the game. And I was going to be really, really sad if that happened, because obviously Bill really wanted to go with Frank. But the fact that we get the letter in that moment was such a, like, it was such a cathartic moment of, like, yes, technically speaking, they got the happy ending, which the creators of the show have said, this is the idea of a happy ending in this world and what it looks like, which,
I mean,
is
you know what?
heartbreaking.
I don't even think it's in that world. I think even in the world we live in, like, to grow old with someone that you love and, like, die on your own terms, I really don't see it getting much fucking better than that.
Yeah. No.
At the end of the day. So, they got to have hot showers. They ate good food. They had good wine. Oh, that was, like, another detail that I really like. He pointed out, like, the Beaujolais wine, which Beaujolais is, like, it's a French wine. It's not aged, so it's released every year, like, at the same time. And a lot of people bring it to Thanksgiving because it's released in November. So I just thought that was interesting. Like, a thing, just, like, they're so thankful for each other and finding each other. I don't know if that was, like, necessarily the idea behind that. But it's not, like, a super common type of wine, so I feel like it probably was.
I mean, it was the same wine that he had when he showed up at the same time. in the okay, I promised myself that I wouldn't cry during this taping. It was the same wine that they had when they first had their meal together. So
yeah, that's what I mean. So like that's kind of it's like I feel like they definitely pulled Beaujolais out for that reason.
yeah.
Like they're having this meal with each other, and even though they don't realize it in that moment, they're about to be so thankful for this interaction. And
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Joel and Ellie. Going back to that. The wow. I got to keep it collected. My gosh. So one of the things that like you were very much pointing out correctly is like not only does when she reads Tessa's name, Ellie. I'm now talking about Ellie reading the suicide note. When she reads Tessa's name, does she stop and it gets handed off to Joel, and we don't really read the rest of the letter, but Ellie's demeanor also changes overall, especially in the way that she acts towards Joel. She's no longer outwardly hostile. She is willing to go along, because in that moment, it's not just this moment of like, I'm going to shut the fuck up because he's going to get sad. It also turns into, I now think I understand what he lost.
yeah, I mean, you know, to her, she doesn't necessarily know how long they've been together. We don't know until this episode that they've been together for seems like at least a decade, if not more.
Yeah.
So I think to read in this letter that somebody left, their suicide letter, that he's talking about Tess, that, yeah, it just really occurs to her like this was not just his like business partner. For
Yeah.
other people to know how important she was to Joel. So yeah, it just gave us like a little more insight into their relationship. So sad. And then when he's like, there's 3 rules, and the first one's we're never going to bring up Taz. Of course he's going to get brought up again, and it's going to be so sad.
I'm like, I can't with this show. I can't with this show. Everyone, like, I'm glad, like, at least I was prepared. Like, like, friends and other gamers had prepared me for the fact that this was going to be emotional, so I knew this was going to be a thing. But I feel so bad for, like, the people that walked into this being like, oh, I heard it's a video game adaptation, but that it's really good. Let me check it out, and then get hit with this. Like, the writing's so good, and like the fact that the original creator is on this and is overseeing this, but also like the additions that were made for this episode, thematically, how it ties itself together. And like, sure, the other thing that you could say is like they get the car. That is a big thing. They now have free transportation out of here.
They have the car, they have like supplies.
Yeah, like that is big for the story. They have things that if they had in the beginning, Tess would not have died. Like, this is a major difference. He has what he needs to do. They can officially start their hero's journey. We're out of Act 1 now. But that's all, like, that's a really simple beat. You get to a house, your friends are dead, but they left you their things. And that would not be impactful at all unless we went through what we just went through. So...
yeah, I mean, it just is like a testament to, creating a video game and the story for it, even though the story in the game is so good, you obviously, like, you're just not able to have all of these storylines because you would be making a movie, not a video game.
Yeah. And
so I'm so glad they're able to kind of flesh these beats out. Who knows if this is things that they've been thinking about for the last 10 years. Like, what if we could do this or like this as a storyline?
I mean, to me, this is, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but a lot of these, I'm pretty sure this is not 1-to-1. I'm pretty sure Frank dies somehow in a completely different way in the game. But
he in the game, he gets infected and he kills himself.
Oh.
Yeah. But
Okay.
it
Well,
seems
I'm
like,
glad they
and
got
then,
the happy
and he has,
ending.
no, and he has and it's not happy. He has like a suicide note. It seems like him and Bill were like fighting at the time. Like it
Oh.
sucks in a different way. So this is way, way better.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad we got this as opposed to that then.
Yeah.
And just to top it off, I'm going to leave us with one last thing on how the episode closes. So everyone got very emotional on the internet that the last shot was essentially the start game screen or the menu screen from the game of the open window that they left so that the house wouldn't stink, that then looks out onto Joel and Ellie as they drive away. Which
I know, and just the implication, obviously you don't want to see them. They are a couple months into decomposing,
Yep.
but the implication that like they're in that room just like holding each other forever. God.
And like potentially watching over them as they leave. But
it's so oh my God. I was like
I can
crying
make
at a
it
window.
worse. I can make it worse. The tape that they picked up, which you might go, it's
my
just a diegetic sound for us to listen, diegetic chance for us to listen to this song again and be in our feels. No, it's not just that. That was the only cassette in that car, which means that the only cassette that they had in their car had their song, their couple song, the song that solidified their relationship is the only cassette in that car. And that is now the only cassette that Joel and Ellie have as they start their adventure. So.
And it's like, Joel and Ellie they have no idea the meaning behind this song. Joel's like, ooh, Linda Ronstadt. Like,
and
she's obviously a popular singer with some great songs, and Ellie has no idea who she is, but it kind of gives you that, oh God, there's like a word in like French, I think. It's like the feeling you get when you see like other people living their lives, or like when you look at a house and you think about like other people's lives going on inside that house.
That is called Sonder.
And it's like Sonder. There you go. And it's like to them, it's just like a really nice song. And there's so many things everyone experiences throughout their life where they're like, oh, okay, cool. But that thing meant so much to someone else, and you'll just never know.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And on that, we're going to end this week's conversation. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll see you in a week for episode 4 of... I can't... If they do this to me again, back to back, I'm going to be so upset.
Yeah, I'm imagining we'll be crying less. I think we'll get... God...
Scare me.
Hopefully.
Please, scare me this episode. I need a different charged emotion. I don't want to be sad next episode. We'll see you next week. This has been the return of the show. Hey, it's Ben here. I haven't done one of these in a while, but just a quick reminder that if you are following, go ahead and make sure you leave us a review on your favorite podcatcher of choice. It does help people find the show. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. It is where all of our content is, and we're really close to monetization. Thanks.